Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and write a comment. This will help promote the video. Enjoy watching. The floorboards creaked a familiar symphony beneath my feet as I climbed the stairs, each step echoing in the cavernous silence of the old house. It wasn't an unpleasant sound, not yet. It was the comforting soundtrack of my childhood, a lullaby sung by the worn wooden bones of this place. Except tonight, the lullaby had a discordant note. A faint, rhythmic scratching was woven into the creaks, emanating from somewhere down the hallway. I paused, heart stuttering in my chest. This wasn't new. These whispers, these scratchings, they had been a constant companion since I was a child. Back then, they were dismissed as childish fears, overactive imagination fueled by too many ghost stories. But they never truly left. They were like unwelcome guests who always found a way to slip back in, leaving me feeling like I was perpetually being watched. The scratching grew louder, a frantic scraping against the surface of something. Curiosity, a morbid fascination that always seemed to outweigh common sense, propelled me forward. I tiptoed down the hallway, the air thick with dust motes dancing in the moonlight that streamed through a high window. The sound was coming from the linen closet at the end of the hall. It was always the locked doors, the unseen spaces, where the whispers and scratchings seemed to congregate. This one, however, had never made a noise before. My hand hovered over the cold brass knob, a nervous tremor shaking it slightly. My reflection, pale and drawn in the dusty glass of the cupboard door beside it, stared back at me. Just your imagination, I whispered to the reflection, more for my own reassurance than anything else. But even as the words left my lips, a voice, a disembodied plea drifted from behind the linen closet door. "Please, let me out." It was a raspy whisper, barely audible, but it sent a jolt of icy fear down my spine. I stumbled back, knocking against the wall with a thud. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down even harder than the weight of the unseen entity trapped behind the door. "Who's there?" I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, then a choked sob, followed by another desperate plea. "Anyone, please." My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the creaking floorboards and the rustling of leaves outside. I stared at the locked door, the brass knob glinting coldly in the moonlight. Suddenly, a loud bang resonated from downstairs, followed by the faint shouts of my brother. Relief flooded me, momentarily pushing back the chilling encounter. "Sarah, what was that?" My brother's voice, laced with concern, drifted up the stairs. "Just something fell over," I called back, forcing a lightness into my voice that I didn't feel. He didn't question it, thankfully. Soon, his footsteps faded away, and I was alone again, the silence pressing in, heavy and suffocating. I glanced back at the linen closet door, the place and the scratching a chilling memory. Maybe it really was just my imagination. But as I crept back to my room, a cold sensation lingered on my skin, a reminder that the unseen presence behind the door was still waiting, still begging. The whispers started subtly, a faint murmur that seemed to seep from the floorboards themselves. I first noticed them during breakfast, a soft, incessant pleading that only I could hear. My brother, munching on his cereal, completely oblivious, just shot me a curious look when I flinched mid-sentence. "Everything all right, sis?" he asked, a spoonful of milk dribbling down his chin. "Yeah," I mumbled, forcing a smile. "Just thought I heard something outside." He shrugged, more interested in his phone than the phantom whispers that were slowly turning my breakfast cold. This had become my new normal, a constant low hum of unease, punctuated by occasional bursts of desperate pleas or frantic scratching. It wasn't just the whispers, though. Lately, the apparitions had gotten bolder. A glimpse of a shadowy figure flitting across the periphery of my vision, a fleeting touch on my arm that sent shivers down my spine. These occurrences, however, were too brief, too ambiguous to share with anyone. Who would believe me? Tonight, however, the whispers were relentless, growing louder as the shadows deepened in the dimming light. They seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the empty rooms of the house. "Help us," they pleaded, the voices growing in number and desperation. "Let us in." Terror gnawed at me. My childhood fear had morphed into a suffocating paranoia that threatened to consume me. I retreated to my room, slamming the door shut and shoving a heavy dresser against it for good measure. The whispers reached a feverish pitch, now accompanied by the sound of frantic clawing at the walls. I buried my head under a pillow, trying to shut out the chilling chorus, but it was no use. The sound seemed to bypass my ears, drilling straight into my skull. Suddenly, the sound of frantic knocking cut through the cacophony. "Sarah, open the door." It was my brother's voice, laced with panic. I peeked out cautiously from under the pillow. The scratching and whispers had stopped. Hesitantly, I approached the door, peeping through the keyhole. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom just called," he said, his voice trembling. "She's at the hospital." "Dad?" "Dad had an accident." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My father, a man who seemed invincible, indestructible, was suddenly laid low. The fear for him momentarily eclipsed the terror emanating from within the house. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Is he going to be okay?" My brother choked back a sob. "They don't know yet." The urgency of the situation left no room for further investigation of the haunting. I rushed to the hospital with my brother, the chilling pleas and frantic scratching receding into the background, replaced by a new, more consuming fear for my father's well-being. Days bled into weeks at the hospital. My father, a once vibrant man, lay pale and fragile in the sterile white room. The accident, a head-on collision with a drunk driver, had left him in a coma. The doctors offered little hope, their words laced with a heavy dose of clinical detachment. My brother and I became fixtures at the hospital, existing in a blurry haze of worry and exhaustion. The whispers and apparitions from the old house faded into a distant memory, replaced by the constant hum of medical equipment and the sterile scent of disinfectant. One particularly bleak afternoon, as I sat beside my father's unmoving form, a thick envelope arrived addressed to me. The return address was simply the postman. My stomach clenched. This wasn't the first correspondence I'd received from this unsettling sender. The previous letters had arrived sporadically over the past year, each containing cryptic messages scrawled in a spidery hand. Messages that alluded to those trapped between and the veil thinning. I dismissed them as the deranged ramblings of a neighborhood crank, but in the face of my current anxieties, the latest letter felt like a malevolent presence in the sterile hospital room. I tore open the envelope, the crisp white paper feeling cold and clammy in my hands. Inside, a single line was scrawled in the same unsettling handwriting. "They grow restless. The veil weakens." Panic clawed at my throat. Was this some kind of twisted joke? Or was it connected to the whispers, the apparitions, everything that had been happening at the house? "Sarah, is everything all right?" My brother's voice broke through my mounting fear. He stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. I quickly stashed the letter away, shoving it deep into my purse. "Just thinking about Dad," I mumbled, forcing a smile. He sighed, his youthful face etched with worry. The doctor said there hasn't been any change. We sat in silence for a while, the ticking of the clock the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet. My mind, however, was a whirlwind of thoughts. Could the events at the house be somehow connected to my father's accident? Was it all some elaborate, nightmarish coincidence, or was there a deeper, more sinister force at play? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The whispers, the apparitions, they had always felt malevolent, but this felt like a threat, a harbinger of something worse to come. The line between reality and my childhood fears seemed to be blurring with each passing day. Discharged from the hospital with a cocktail of medications and a heavy heart, I returned to the old house. My brother, bless his soul, had arranged for a live-in nurse to look after Dad, allowing me some much-needed time to gather myself and deal with the accumulating bills. The house greeted me with a heavy silence, a stark contrast to the cacophony of sounds that had plagued me before. Yet the silence felt charged, pregnant with an unseen tension. The letter from the postman burned a hole in my purse. It had become a constant reminder of the unseen entity, a chilling premonition of something terrible brewing. As I unpacked my meager belongings, a deafening scream shattered the silence. It wasn't the frantic whispers or the desperate pleas of the past. This scream was raw, primal, filled with a soul-crushing agony. My heart hammered in my chest as I raced towards the source of the sound, my father's old study at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar, a sliver of flickering light spilling out from within. "Dad?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response, just another blood-curdling scream, followed by a deep, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. Panic warring with a morbid curiosity, I inched closer to the door. The sounds subsided, replaced by a heavy silence that felt even more suffocating. Maybe it's just the wind, a voice whispered in my ear, a voice that wasn't mine. I spun around, but there was nothing there, only the empty hallway bathed in the dim afternoon light. My breath caught in my throat. Was I losing my mind? Taking a deep, steadying breath, I reached out and pushed the study door open. The room was in disarray, papers scattered across the floor, a bookshelf toppled over. But my father was gone. "Dad?" I called out again, my voice echoing eerily in the empty room. There was a low moan from behind the heavy drapes that covered the single window. My hand trembled as I reached for the fabric, a sickening premonition crawling up my throat. "Don't," a voice rasped, seemingly emanating from everywhere and nowhere at once. "He's not there anymore." Terror coursed through me, freezing me in place. Slowly, I pulled back the drapes, revealing an empty window and a sight that sent the blood draining from my face. Across the street, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, stood the old abandoned house on Maple Street. The one everyone said was haunted. The one that looked disturbingly familiar. The abandoned house on Maple Street loomed across from my window, a chilling reflection of the horrors that lurked within my own walls. Its boarded-up windows, like vacant eyes, seemed to stare back at me, mirroring the dread that had settled in my gut. The scream, the growl, my father's disappearance, it all felt inextricably linked to that dilapidated structure. But how? What connection could it possibly have? Memories flickered in my mind. Childhood dares, whispered legends about a family who vanished without a trace, rumors of a dark presence that clung to the place like a shroud. It had always been a source of fascination and fear in equal measure, a forbidden playground for restless imaginations. Suddenly, a loud bang came from downstairs, followed by the sound of the back door slamming shut. My brother. Relief washed over me, momentarily pushing back the creeping dread. "Sarah, what's going on here?" He burst into the room, his face flushed with exertion. "The nurse said you screamed." "There was a noise," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it was Dad." He looked around the ransacked study, his gaze landing on the open window and the house across the street. "What's that place?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of unease. "The abandoned house," I mumbled, avoiding his eyes. "They say it's haunted." His eyebrows shot up. "Haunted? You don't believe that stuff, do you?" I didn't answer, did I? Part of me clung to a shred of rationality, dismissing it all as a morbid coincidence fueled by stress and grief. But then there were the whispers, the apparitions, the letter from the postman, and now this, the terrifying screams and the unsettling sight across the street. "I need to check something," I blurted out, a newfound urgency propelling me forward. "I'll be back soon." Before my brother could protest, I dashed out of the room, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I needed answers, even if they led me deeper into the chilling reality that was slowly unraveling around me. Rain lashed against my face as I sprinted down Maple Street, the abandoned house looming ever closer. It looked even more menacing in the storm, its peeling paint and broken windows gaping like empty eyes. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a war between apprehension and a desperate need for answers raging within me. Reaching the overgrown yard, I pushed past a sagging wooden fence, ignoring the protesting snap of a rotten board. The closer I got, the more the oppressive silence of the house seemed to press down on me, thicker than the humid storm air. Finally, I stood before the boarded-up front door. There was no doorknob, no bell, no way to announce my arrival at this unwelcome abode. Just a faded peeling sign above the doorway. The Blackwood Manor. "Hello," I called out, my voice swallowed by the silence. The wind howled in response, whipping stray strands of hair across my face. Was I crazy for coming here? A part of me screamed yes, but the unsettling events at my own house held me rooted to the spot. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye from a broken window on the second floor. A dark shape, a fleeting glimpse of something large and shadowy, vanished as quickly as it appeared. My breath hitched. Was it just a trick of the light and the wind? Or was there something else watching me from within? "Anyone there?" I called out again, my voice trembling slightly. This time there was no response, just a cold gust of wind that sent a shiver down my spine. A feeling of dread, so potent it felt physical, washed over me. I knew I needed to leave, to get back to my brother and the relative safety of my own house, if safe could be used for a place haunted by whispers. As I turned to leave, a guttural growl echoed from somewhere within the house. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, raw and primal, filled with a chilling hunger. Panic seized me, and I bolted. I didn't care about the rain, the uneven ground, or the potential dangers of the neglected yard. All I wanted was to put as much distance between myself and the Blackwood Manor as possible. Finally, bursting through the gate and collapsing onto the wet grass of my own yard, I gasped for breath. Looking back, the abandoned house seemed smaller, further away, but the chilling feeling of being watched lingered. What did I find there? Or more accurately, what found me? As I staggered to my feet, the rain washing away the remaining traces of childish fear, a new, more terrifying question formed in my mind. Was the entity trapped within the Blackwood Manor, or had it somehow infiltrated my own house, taking my father with it? The storm that drenched Maple Street the night I visited the Blackwood Manor seemed to mirror the tempest raging inside me. The unnerving connection between the abandoned house and the unsettling occurrences at my own was undeniable. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a constant low hum of fear that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. The whispers, once a chilling murmur, had escalated into a chorus of desperate pleas. They seemed to emanate from everywhere: the walls, the floorboards, even the empty air itself. "Let us out," they pleaded, their voices gaining an urgency that sent shivers down my spine. One particularly harrowing night, the pleas were punctuated by a violent shaking of the bedroom door. It rattled against the frame with a force that threatened to break the hinges. Panic surged through me, a primal urge to flee battling with a morbid curiosity. "Who's there?" I croaked, my voice barely audible above the pounding of my heart. There was a pause, thick with tension, before a voice, raspy and desperate, drifted from behind the door. "Help us. We're trapped." It was unlike any voice I'd heard before, a chorus of whispers seemingly condensed into a single, tortured entity. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but the thought of my father, potentially trapped alongside this unseen horror, spurred me into action. I don't know how to help," I stammered, surprised by my own boldness. "The door is locked." Another pause, followed by a chilling laugh. It wasn't a human sound, devoid of humor and filled with a malevolent plea. "The key doesn't matter," the voice hissed. "There are ways." The words hung heavy in the air, a promise of something sinister. A sudden cold draft swept across the room, extinguishing the bedside lamp and plunging me into darkness. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of desperate voices swirling around me. I stumbled back, heart hammering against my ribs. In the darkness, the bedroom door creaked open a sliver. A shaft of moonlight illuminated a fleeting glimpse of something beyond, a distorted hallway stretching into an unnatural darkness. Terror choked me, a primal scream rising in my throat. But before I could make a sound, a cold, clammy hand clamped around my mouth, stifling my scream. "Don't make a sound," a voice whispered in my ear, sending a jolt of icy fear down my spine. "It's not safe out there." "My brother." Relief washed over me, so potent it made my legs buckle. He pulled me away from the doorway, guiding me back towards the bed. "What happened?" he whispered, his voice laced with concern. The door," I stammered, my voice trembling. "It opened on its own." He looked at the door, a sliver of apprehension crossing his face. Then, with a determined glint in his eyes, he marched towards the door and slammed it shut. He checked the lock, fiddling with a rusty key that hummed forgotten on a nail beside the doorframe. It was a key I hadn't seen before, a key that seemed to appear out of thin air. "There," he said, wiping his brow. "Should be secure now." But the doubt in his voice betrayed his confidence. The whispers continued for a while, fainter now, as if retreating back behind the barrier of the locked door. But the feeling of being watched, of being a pawn in a larger, sinister game, lingered heavy in the air. And for the first time, I realized the truth. The entity from the Blackwood Manor wasn't just contained within its decaying walls. It had somehow woven itself into the fabric of my own home, and perhaps, even more terrifyingly, into my own life. The house felt different. The silence, once a suffocating blanket, now pulsed with a hidden energy, a malevolent tension that vibrated beneath the surface. My brother, bless his ever-skeptical heart, attributed it all to stress and grief. But I knew better. The whispers had subsided, replaced by a watchful stillness that sent shivers down my spine. It was like a predator waiting in the shadows, its presence all the more terrifying for its unseen nature. Desperate for answers, I started scouring the internet, searching for anything related to the Blackwood Manor. The pickings were slim. a few local legends, a couple of blurry photos posted on ghost hunting forums, but nothing substantial. Then I stumbled upon a dusty old website dedicated to the town's history. Buried deep within its archives, I found a faded newspaper clipping titled "The Blackwood Tragedy." It spoke of a prominent family who vanished without a trace from their newly built mansion on Maple Street over a century ago. The article mentioned rumors of strange occurrences, whispers in the night, and a shadowy figure seen lurking on the property. A cold sweat prickled my skin. The similarities were undeniable. The whispers, the entity trapped behind a barrier. Could the events at the Blackwood Manor be a dark reflection of what was happening in my own house now? "Hey Sarah, you alright?" My brother's voice broke through my frantic web search. He stood in the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. "Just reading something," I mumbled, quickly minimizing the website. "About the house?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of apprehension. "Maybe," I admitted, hesitantly showing him the newspaper article. "There was a family who disappeared from there a long time ago. Sound familiar?" He scanned the article, his face grim. "So you think whatever's happening here is connected to that place?" "It seems likely, doesn't it?" I replied, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Then we need to find a way to stop it," he declared, his voice resolute. We spent the next few days in a whirlwind of research. We devoured books on the paranormal, interviewed a local historian with a penchant for ghost stories, and even contacted a self-proclaimed paranormal investigator whose credentials seemed more dubious than legitimate. The investigator, a portly man named Ed with a penchant for flamboyant suits and an even more flamboyant personality, arrived with a toolbox overflowing with gadgets that looked more like props from a B-movie. He spent an hour cleansing the house with sage smoke and muttering incantations that sounded suspiciously like gibberish. Disappointed, yet unsurprised by Ed's theatrics, we were back to square one. But at least my brother and I were in this together. The fear was still there, but a spark of defiance had ignited within me. I wouldn't let this unseen entity control my life, or worse, take my father. We needed a plan, and it needed to be something more than sage smoke and bad chanting. Disillusioned by Ed the investigator and his theatrical ghost-busting act, my brother and I sat huddled around the kitchen table, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. "So, what now?" My brother sighed, running a hand through his already messy hair. "There has to be a way to stop it," I said, my voice tight with determination. "There has to be a reason the key appeared, a way to reverse whatever happened." My mind cast back to the chilling moment. The door had creaked open, revealing a glimpse of an unnatural darkness beyond. The key, appearing out of thin air, felt like a cruel clue, a taunting challenge from the entity trapped within. "The key," I murmured, the word sparking a flicker of hope in my chest. "Maybe it's not for our door. Maybe it's for..." My brother's eyes widened in understanding. "The Blackwood Manor." We spent the next few days in a flurry of activity. Armed with the newspaper clipping and the rusty key, we talked to the local librarian, a stern woman with an encyclopedic knowledge of the town's history. With a skeptical sniff, she confirmed that the Blackwood Manor, now a decaying eyesore, still stood on the outskirts of town. "But why would you want to go there?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "We have a reason," I replied cryptically, unwilling to divulge the details of our haunted house predicament. Finally, armed with a hand-drawn map from the librarian and a healthy dose of trepidation, we set off for the Blackwood Manor. The closer we got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees lining the road grew gnarled and twisted, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The air grew thick and humid, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. "This place gives me the creeps," my brother muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "Me too," I admitted, forcing a smile. Finally, we reached the dilapidated manor. It looked even worse in daylight, its paint peeling in grotesque flakes, windows like vacant eye sockets staring out at the world. Standing before the boarded-up front door, a strange sense of familiarity washed over me. It felt wrong, like a door that shouldn't exist, leading to somewhere it shouldn't. "Do you think it will work?" My brother's voice betrayed a tremor of doubt. I held the rusty key up to the light, its dull surface glinting in the afternoon sun. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward and reached for the keyhole hidden beneath layers of peeling paint. A strange sense of anticipation thrummed through me. Was this the answer we were looking for, or were we simply walking into a trap? The rusty key felt oddly warm in my hand, a disconcerting contrast to the chill that seemed to emanate from the boarded-up doorway. My brother stood beside me, his face etched with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I swallowed hard, the metallic tang of fear thick on my tongue. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my voice sounding far more confident than I felt. With a trembling hand, I inserted the key into the rusted lock. It turned with a sickening groan sound echoing through the oppressive silence like a scream. A wave of nausea washed over me, a primal instinct screaming at me to turn back. But the thought of my father, trapped somewhere within this chilling reality, spurred me forward. Taking a deep breath, I pushed against the boarded door. It creaked open with surprising ease, revealing a gaping maw of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. "We should probably go back," my brother said, his voice laced with a tremor of fear. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "We came this far. We can't turn back now." Stepping cautiously over the threshold, I was plunged into an inky blackness. The air hung heavy with the smell of dust and decay, and the silence was so profound it felt like a physical presence pressing down on me. "Sado, wait!" My brother's voice, barely audible in the darkness, reached me from behind. I fumbled in my purse, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight. The weak beam of light sliced through the darkness, revealing a scene of utter disarray. Furniture lay overturned, cobwebs draped like ghostly curtains, and dust motes danced in the air like malevolent fireflies. "This place is a wreck," my brother muttered, his voice echoing eerily in the vast emptiness. We ventured deeper into the house, the floorboards groaning under our weight. The air grew colder, and the oppressive silence seemed to press in on us from all sides. Every creak, every groan, sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, a gust of icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing my phone's flashlight and plunging us back into darkness. "Sarah, where are you?" My brother's voice, laced with panic, echoed in the darkness. "Here," I called back, fumbling for my phone again. But before I could turn on the light, a cold, clammy hand clamped over my mouth, stifling my scream. A raspy voice, filled with a chilling amusement, whispered in my ear, "Welcome home, child." The blood drained from my face. This wasn't the answer I was looking for. This was the beginning of a new nightmare. The hand over my mouth was cold and slick, sending a jolt of terror through me. I struggled against the unseen force, desperate to scream to alert my brother to the danger. But the grip was firm, unrelenting. "Don't make a sound," the raspy voice hissed in my ear, sending shivers down my spine. "It won't help you." Panic threatened to consume me. In the suffocating darkness, My imagination conjured horrifying images of the entity that held me captive. My brother's voice, a mixture of fear and determination, cut through the oppressive silence. "Sarah, what's happening?" he called out, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the house. "Leave," I rasped, the words muffled by the hand over my mouth. "Get out of here." The entity chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, filled with a malevolent plea. "Too late for goodbyes, child. You've both come too far." Suddenly, a faint glow emanated from behind the entity, revealing a shadowy figure. It was tall and emaciated, its form obscured by the darkness. Tendrils of inky blackness swirled around it, and its eyes, if it had any, glowed with an unnatural orange light. Fear turned to a cold fury. I wouldn't let this entity control me. Not anymore. "Let me go," I shouted, pushing against the unseen force with all my might. "Let my father go." The entity tilted its head, the glowing eyes seeming to bore into me. "Your father, he's already one of us, lost to the darkness." The revelation struck me like a physical blow. Despair threatened to engulf me, but a spark of defiance flickered within. My father couldn't be gone, not like this. There had to be a way to fight back. A memory surfaced, the librarian's words about the Blackwood family's disappearance. They say the wife, she refused to be a part of it. They found her diary, a desperate plea for help. Hope, fragile but tenacious, bloomed in my chest. Maybe there was an answer hidden within the house, a way to sever the entity's hold. "There's something you're not telling me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Something about the family who lived here." The entity hesitated, a flicker of surprise crossing its shadowy form. "What? What do you know?" "Enough to know you haven't won," I bluffed, forcing a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "There's a way to stop you, and I'm going to find it." The entity lunged at me, its shadowy form reaching out with unnatural speed. But before it could make contact, a shout pierced the darkness. "Leave her alone." My brother appeared from the shadows, a makeshift torch fashioned from a fallen branch in his hand. The flames, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, cast a flickering light, momentarily pushing back the darkness. The entity recoiled from the light, its form wavering like smoke in a strong wind. It let out a guttural snarl, filled with a mixture of frustration and fear. You will pay for this," it rasped, its voice fading as it retreated deeper into the darkness. The hand covering my mouth vanished, and I gasped for breath, clutching my brother for support. We stood there for a moment, the only sound our ragged breaths echoing in the oppressive silence. "Are you all right?" my brother asked, his voice laced with concern. "I think so," I whispered, my voice still shaky. "We need to find that diary. It might be the key to stopping this thing." With renewed determination, we ventured deeper into the Blackwood Manor, the flickering light of the makeshift torch our only guide. We were no longer just searching for answers. We were fighting for our lives and for the soul of my father, lost somewhere within the darkness. Dust motes danced in the flickering torchlight as we navigated the labyrinthine halls of the Blackwood Manor. Cobwebs clung to everything like ghostly shrouds, and the air hung heavy with the smell of decay. Every creaking floorboard and groaning pipe sent shivers down my spine, a constant reminder of the malevolent entity lurking somewhere within these decaying walls. "There has to be another way out of this place," my brother muttered, his voice strained from hours of exploration. "There probably is," I agreed, trying to sound confident despite the knot of dread twisting in my stomach. "But finding the diary has to be our priority. The library, according to the faded newspaper clipping, should have been on the west wing." We trudged on, pushing open creaking doors that revealed dusty living rooms, cobweb-draped bedrooms, and abandoned nurseries filled with broken toys. Each room was a chilling snapshot of a life abruptly ended, a family vanished without a trace. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we stumbled upon a large room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Cobwebs hung between the books like macabre decorations, with a faint glimmer of hope lit within me. This had to be the library. We spent the next hour in a frenzy of activity, pulling aside dusty tomes and tearing through mildew-ridden papers. Each book we examined felt like a desperate plea from the past, a story waiting to be told. There, my brother's voice, laced with excitement, cut through the silence. He held aloft a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and peeling. The diary. I breathed, a surge of relief washing over me. We huddled together in the dusty corner, the flickering torchlight casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The diary's pages were brittle and yellowed, filled with faded script. It was the last testament of Amelia Blackwood, the wife who refused to be a part of whatever darkness had consumed her family. The diary entries were chilling. Amelia spoke of strange occurrences, whispers in the night, and a growing fear of her husband's descent into madness. He spoke of a ritual, a doorway to another realm, and a price that needed to be paid. But Amelia refused to be a part of it. The final entry was the most cryptic. It spoke of a hidden room, a sanctuary protected by a celestial symbol drawn with moonlight. Inside, Amelia believed, lay the key to breaking the curse, a hidden weakness of the entity they had unwittingly invited into their home. A celestial symbol drawn with moonlight, I murmured, tracing the words with my finger. But where is this hidden room? We spent another painstaking hour scouring the library, searching for any hidden compartments or clues to the location of the sanctuary. Finally, I noticed a faint etching on the back of the bookshelf opposite the window. It was a star constellation, vaguely familiar. "Wait," I said, stepping back to get a better look. "Isn't that Ursa Major?" My brother's eyes widened in understanding. "The Big Dipper. The constellation is visible through the window tonight." With renewed determination, we emptied the bookshelf, revealing a cold, damp stone wall behind it. A quick search revealed a small indentation shaped like the constellation. We spent the next agonizing minutes waiting for nightfall, the oppressive silence broken only by our racked breaths. Finally, as the first sliver of moon peeked through the window, we positioned the burning branch to cast a light on the indentation. A faint click echoed through the room, and a section of the wall swung open, revealing a narrow passage bathed in an ethereal blue light. The air within hummed with an unknown energy, a beacon of hope in a sea of darkness. We exchanged a determined look. This was it. This was our chance to fight back, to save my father, and to banish the entity that had plagued these walls for far too long. With the diary clutched tightly in my hand, we stepped into the hidden passage, ready to face whatever awaited us in the darkness.